Thanks everyone for taking the time this afternoon, or depending where you are, taking the time today to listen to me blab about UTMs. Let's see. My name is Adam Erstel. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for about 7 years, and I come from a software engineering background. So I guess you could almost call me an accidental dev, even though it kind of doesn't make sense, but that's how I got introduced into the ecosystem, and I've been having fun building things ever since. So what I'm hoping to cover a little bit today is, talking about UTMs themselves. Hopefully everyone here, has used them or heard of them in the past, so I won't spend too much time. I'm going to talk about campaign influence and the impacts that we see today. I've got some information on the old approach of tracking UTMs, as well as, eventually talking into the frustrations that drove me to solve it in a different way. I do list a couple of resources throughout the presentation. I've got links. I can figure out how to share them with Kate and Kevin if anyone wants. I've got QR codes on the final slide, so you can take pictures and get to the links. And yeah, that should be everything. So UTMs themselves, it's not just an acronym. There is a meaning to it. It's a company who was formed in the late 1990s. Yes, the internet was around back then. And it was an early attempt at trying to track where people were coming from to get to your webpage, right? And what's interesting is we still heavily use this same approach today, right? And very simply, it's just putting some parameters at the end of your URLs that you're pasting in LinkedIn or pasting in Google Ads or anything like that. Right. So if we take a look at a URL, everything that's highlighted here in the light blue box, those are the UTM parameters themselves. And then here we have the values, right? And these values are often something that marketing comes up with. If you're working with a digital agency for advertising, sometimes they'll come up with it. Hopefully you're aligned in both those cases, but that is what a UTM is. Now, when we're thinking of business impact, right, the use of these allow us to do a few different things. We can measure the return, or basically what are we getting by spending this money or putting this effort in, right? So we can do that by channel. There's a bunch of different clever ways that we can carve up that measurement, but it's an important part of the business on finding out, we're spending X amount of money. What are we getting from it? We can also look at, which of our efforts are giving us the highest quality leads. And if we're lucky enough in how we measure things, turning into actual revenue, right? So being able to tie all of that from a 30-year-old concept, I think is pretty cool. Now, when we're thinking of Salesforce, right? Salesforce gives us that single source of truth. I'm not going to harp on this. I'm sure everyone here has heard it a million times, but it allows us to store all of those data points, right? Now that we have a bunch of those data points, right, we can use that for what's called multi-touch attribution, right? So in an ideal world, we can see that, Arthur had clicked on 4 or 5 different ads. They engaged with different email call to actions, and all of those somewhat contributed to an opportunity closing for millions of dollars. And marketing's the hero, and we'll have a lot more money next year to grow what we're doing. Yeah, I might be a little bit delusional in that scenario, but it's something we all hopefully secretly strive for, right? And Salesforce, because all that data is in there, you can expose it to different teams. Salespeople who might be working with a contact, they can see, what has this person been interacting with. Marketing can do all of their measurements and things like that. And of course, leadership has all of the confidence to give marketers a lot more money to, continue the snowball and flywheel effects. Now, when we're thinking of the data inside of Salesforce, right, we start off with our campaigns, right? So this is, maybe it's a digital ad, maybe it's a little bit more broad, and it's simply, the collection of ads on a particular platform. It's really up to the marketer to decide, how granular do we want to get with a campaign. We have contacts, right? The humans who are doing things. And we have the opportunities, which is how we hope to, get some actual revenue and deliver something to our contacts and our customers. When we're thinking of campaigns and contacts, those are linked together with a junction object called campaign member, which simply says Arthur interacted with the Google ad, Q1 teaser, right? And what's really nice is a lot of marketing platforms will help automate the population of these campaign member records. Sometimes or most of the time, it's really helpful and guided by the marketer. So that's one important aspect of it. The other important aspect is the opportunity contact role, right? So we're actually linking the human, Arthur, to the opportunity, which represents hopefully some closed revenue. Now, I have all of this information here, linked together because we need a lot of this information for campaign influence. If we're using the primary source campaign influence, we actually only need the opportunity in the campaign, right? And when we're looking at the opportunity, it's a literal pointer to the campaign, and that campaign gets all of the influence. But if we're looking at first touch, last touch, or even distribution, we need all of these data touch points, all of these data points in order for the campaign influence models to work correctly. When we have all that data working great, we can start looking at some flashy reports and dashboards. I've got a link right here for a accelerator that I put together, which installs a few dashboards and like 30 some odd reports. But, with Salesforce, it helps you collect this information. It performs the calculations of the influence itself based on all those touch points. And then again, you have your pretty pictures. So that's kind of how Salesforce works. Now, I want to go down a little bit of a journey with our friend Arthur, who, might start looking at our company or our solution, right? So often, someone's scrolling through LinkedIn, sitting in some inconspicuous place, and they come across an ad. Maybe they click on it, and then something shiny rolls by, but that little bit of a seed has been planted. Maybe a couple days later, they're actively searching for a solution. They click on your Google ad, they browse a little bit, and if we're lucky, maybe they'll make a note in their comparison doc, right? Because buyers are looking at multiple solutions usually. Another couple days go by, and they remembered your site because they have it in the notes. They Google it, they click on that ad, which sometimes drives me crazy because I'm specifically looking for a company. Why do I need to advertise for it? But that's for a whole nother discussion. They visit your site through that ad, they browse a little bit, and they're ready to take that next step. They register to attend a webinar on whatever solution you're providing. Another few days go by, they get that thanks for attending webinar that the marketers have automated, hopefully, right? They click on the call to action to learn a little bit more. And then back on their laptop, they'll go to the website and they'll sign up for another like for a demo, right? Just between them and sales. The last touch point in this hypothetical is, they'll get that sales follow-up email maybe a couple days later. They click on that call to action and then they finally make the purchase. I'm interested to see in chat, does this journey kind of represent what you see more often, or are you one of the lucky companies where it's, first ad, they click it, they buy it, and we're good to go? So sound off in the chat there which of those scenarios, is more likely. The longer one, yeah, I tend to see that too. Yeah. So I put together this quick little table to summarize the 5 touch points, because I'm gonna show this a little bit as we look at how we've gone and solved this problem. Right. So the approach that's heavily blogged about right now, well, not just right now, but over the last 8 years, it's all pretty much the same approach. Right. We have that first ad or call to action that gets clicked. The marketer has put their UTM parameters in there. What we need to do is we need to capture those UTMs as part of a form submission, right? In the account engagement world, that can be your pardot form, or that can be your form handler. Doesn't matter which form technology you're using, those UTM parameters need to get stamped onto that prospect record. From there, that information is synced to Salesforce. And then we have Salesforce automations that go ahead and create the campaign member based on whatever your business rules might be. If there's a different approach that you've come across, I would love to see that in chat. But I spent a lot of time over the last, 3 months talking with a bunch of people in the community. And this is the only approach that I have seen to date. Now, when we're thinking of that old approach, right, this kind of means that we have to put custom fields all over the place. We have to make sure they're on the form. We have to make sure it's on the prospect, it's on the lead, it's on the campaign member, right? It's a lot of data that needs to flow a little bit just so that we can honestly say that, Arthur clicked on this ad and that gets tied to some revenue. When we're thinking of the automation, right, we have the prospect, the sync process, which is a native automation, so to speak, going to the lead and or contact. We have a couple of different flows, usually record triggered, and then we finally end up with information on that campaign member. If we're looking at some JavaScript, right, this might be on your website. This first version, I got a few different samples of JavaScript to show. This first one is kind of the early evolution of this, where this would get put onto your forms, and then as people visit your forms, assuming they have the UTM parameters on that landing page visit, you'll be able to stamp those UTM parameters into your hidden fields so that it flows all of the ways that we showed earlier. Now, there might be a little bit of variation here in the JavaScript depending on your form technology and things like that, but this is the general gist of it. Now, when we're thinking of those 5 different UTM touch points, the JavaScript I briefly showed on screen, it's going to allow us to maybe capture just this one touch point, right? If they clicked on the ad and immediately filled out the form, we're good to go. But if they browsed around any number of times in between, we're not going to capture anything. So that's where marketers cry. All right, so there's a few solutions out there in the blogosphere, so to speak, which says, okay, well, let's start stamping these UTM parameters in cookies, right? That way, if they visit the site, they click on a few different pages, and then they finally fill out a form, we're still going to capture that UTM information. So again, the JavaScript itself might be varied a little bit. The idea is there's one script that we have on all website pages, right? And this script's job is to capture the UTMs from the URL and shove them into cookies. That's all that this is doing. We have another block of JavaScript that needs to go with our forms, right? So it's a little bit different from the one that I showed previously, where this script is saying, instead of grabbing it from the URL, I'm going to grab my values from a cookie, right? So you've kind of, split it in two pieces, and it gives us a little bit more reliability on grabbing those UTMs. So we go through this little bit more effort, and now we reliably get one of those 5 touch points. Okay, well, the next step that I've seen in working with clients and, talking with people is, well, let's use this cookie approach and let's capture the first touch and the last touch, right? So we can now shove extra information into cookies. We can shove extra information into our custom fields, and we're going to be able to capture, a lot more information. So we are duplicating some of our JavaScript. We're duplicating all of our custom fields. We're adding everything to automations. And we get 2 of these 5 touch points. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you're in that lucky group where, maybe the first touch or it's just 2 touches and that kind of represents the whole journey, hey, this is perfect. That's all that you really need. But often, especially in enterprise or B2B, right, it's a lot of touch points that are going to be needed, and 5 might be far too few. And it would be really nice to be able to capture, everything. So when we're thinking about the old approach, the one I just covered, right, we have some extra things that we need to consider, right? If we're using, account engagement and we're dropping iframes onto our pages, right, we need to make sure that the outer page passes those UTMs into the iframe so that the account engagement form can stamp the hidden fields and make sure everything gets passed through. Okay, so there's a few different approaches that are out there. It's going to depend on your site. I didn't want to, keep going with 100 different variations of JavaScript, but there are some blog posts that cover each of these approaches. When we're thinking of that first touch UTM and trying to use JavaScript to capture it and shove it in cookies, we need to be a little bit careful because we might overwrite the first touch from either another browser visit. And if we're looking to have Salesforce automation figure out if it's first touch or not, right, it gets tricky as other visits get identified. So in our example with Arthur, he first started interacting with UTMs on his phone, right? Later, he used his laptop to submit the form. And if his phone now becomes identified and becomes a prospect, well, now his first touch isn't what the data might think it is. Now, there are some existing third-party apps that are out there that try to help with this. Some of them provide those JavaScript scripts and different solutions to help make that initial data collection easier. A lot of them do still need you to have the form and all the custom fields. So, we still have those limitations. And there are other third-party solutions out there that kind of have their own platform, right? So they'll often ask you to drop some an additional tracking cookie or tracking code on your website, and they're going to want a little bit more access to your data, and then they will house some of your data themselves in order to pull all this information together. Now, when we're thinking of going live or trying to implement the JavaScript approaches, we can't just do it ourselves. We need a team, right? So we need a Salesforce admin to do the custom fields and some of the automations and flow. We need our account engagement admin to also create those custom fields. We need the web developer to take one of those JavaScript samples and apply it to the website. And sometimes I've seen just that act breaking some of the JavaScript on the website. So the web developer needs to wrangle it all together and make it work. The fourth point here I've seen as be, frankly, a huge pain in the ass a lot of the times, right? Marketers having to make sure that every form that gets created has these new fields, has the scripts. We need to test everything to make sure it works, right? It can add, 15 minutes, half an hour for each form, right? And depending on how much you're pumping out forms, that time can add up quickly. Then lastly, if you're working with an advertising agency and they are, creating your ads for you and publishing them, you're definitely going to want to have the alignment on naming conventions, UTM values. I've seen instances where the advertising agency gets a Salesforce campaign ID from the in-house marketing team so that everything can kind of align. So it takes a fair bit of coordination for taking that 30-year-old tech of UTMs and being able to drive actual value out of it. So hopefully this kind of came through in my dialogue a little bit, but there's a lot of complexity going on there, right? And with each step, there's the chance for human error, especially with the forms that you have to create so many times. Even if we were to have a perfect process in-house and everyone follows every step of the checklist. I know I never forget a step in a checklist, but even if you go through all of that, you still end up with incomplete data. You're still missing some of those touch points. And what has frustrated me a lot is I know that account engagement has been tracking this raw information since the day that you installed the account engagement tracking code on your website. So when we're thinking of real world impact, this is a screenshot from one of the customers I've worked with. We can look at the return on investment of certain campaigns, right? And what we can see here is this shows us that, some of our digital ads are underperforming, right? We're spending a lot more, at least based on this chart, we're spending a lot more money than we're bringing in, right? And a lot of that is due to not being able to capture the information at the right time. But, someone just looking at the data, especially as we're promoting data-driven decisions, right? This would tell us that, hey, we need to cut back on some of these advertising channels, right? Now, it's going to frustrate marketing teams because they intuitively know that that's not true, but they don't have the data to support it. So in the client that we were talking about, they were undercounting the impact of their meta ads by at least 30% and probably a little bit higher. Now, at $1 million ad spend, that 30% is a huge chunk of change. So, the impact here of not having all that data, it's a big deal. Now, in my previous role, as a consultant, I'd work on a bunch of different projects, and we were always solving the same problem. So as Kate's mentioning, I think I might have even helped Kate with a couple of customers. Um, but just solving that same problem over and over again, it definitely felt like Groundhog Day. And for those who don't know, it's a movie. I think it's from the 90s, maybe. Um, yeah, so it felt like constantly repeating myself. So I made a solution to solve it. And earlier I mentioned that account engagement has all of the data since you installed the tracking code. And what that looks like is, if we're looking at it from a data model perspective, there are page views, right? So each page view that someone clicks on while they're on the website, it gets tracked inside of account engagement. Collectively, they're grouped together as a visit. And if you have a prospect, that'll show a single record in your visitor in your prospect activity section or visitor activity. And right, so you can see on a prospect per prospect basis all this information, but we just don't have access to it. Now on the Salesforce side in the CRM and like standard objects, we have the contact, lead, and campaign member, and all this information, kind of goes through a chain of events, and it kind of gets connected together. But as a marketer in this context, what I truly want is that page view with UTM parameters to end up creating a campaign member record. Right? It's just that one little line that I'm trying to figure out how to, create that connection. So all the JavaScript and all the custom fields and automations, right? That's just to allow the data to flow all the way around the loop to end up in that campaign member record. So what I created is a custom object inside of Salesforce called a UTM touchpoint. And what it does is it connects all of these different pieces of data together so that a marketer can get exactly what they're hoping to see. And it connects to the campaign, right? Because we have the UTM parameters, we know what campaign it is, and that's what lights up all of this information. If we're looking at the touchpoint record inside of Salesforce, we can see the UTMs themselves that were parsed and cut out of the URL. And this allows, some very simple lookups to find the right campaign. So that'll get stamped. We have a couple other pieces of information, but this is again that record that ties together the campaign to the leader contact. Once we have that, what we can do is we can now look at a campaign itself, right? We define those same UTM parameters so that we can match the right page views. But we can look at a chart and we can see, what are the touch points, right? We can see that information. And what's really cool is we can see it even if they're an anonymous visitor, right? Because in account engagement, the visitor, the visit, and the page views, those get created like instantly, even if someone has not yet identified themselves by filling out a form or clicking on an email that came from the platform. So all that information can, be shown at the campaign level, giving that marketer, the view that has been missing for a while. Now, if I go back to the campaign, right? Another thing that I've seen so many times is people will have those UTM tracking spreadsheets, right? I'm sure everyone here has their own variation, right? And they'll put in the actual link in one column. They'll type in their different UTM parameters. If you're lucky, you might have like a little drop down or pick list inside your spreadsheet so that names are nice and consistent. And then, right, at the end, you have your formula that creates your full URL. And I thought, well, if we can have that in Salesforce, we can kind of do the same thing with a little Lightning Web component where we can put in the actual URL and it spits out the full destination with all the UTM parameters stamped all in one place. So again, because we're tying these page views or UTM touch points to the contact or lead once they've been assigned from account engagement to a Salesforce user, we can then have a related list that shows all of these touch points on the contact or lead record. And where this has helped a couple of people is sales teams who might not have access to the engagement history or might not have access to account engagement. Not that we want salespeople going in there sometimes, but it allows them to see some of this information at the tip of their fingers, as some like to say. Now, when we're looking at that prospect journey, right, because account engagement is tracking every one of those page views, we're able to, or the data can be used to create campaign member records for all of these different touch points, lighting up and in some cases adjusting where the influence is being distributed to. So in those even touch distribution models, we've seen the marketing team be able to say, an extra $500,000 in influence can now be discovered because we're lighting up all of these different touch points. So it's been a cool project to work on, and I just thought I would share it here a little bit. Now, when we're thinking of using UTMs, right, there are a few different best practices, and the first one really is just start using them now if you're not already. Right, account engagement has this data stored, as soon as you start using them. So again, if you're not, just start. You can establish some guidelines. You don't have to make it overly complex, but again, just get started. The next thing that I would recommend is keeping your Salesforce campaign builds as simple as possible. I've seen some situations where people go a little bit crazy with the hierarchies. In a lot of cases, it's do you really need a hierarchy to separate out different years when it can just be a custom field? So really thinking about what needs to be hierarchy driven versus which can be dimensions on the campaign object, I think will be really helpful, especially if you can cut down some of the layers. Consider adding or creating a governance process, right? So this isn't unique to UTMs or anything like that, but getting started is good, but figuring out a way to keep it operational for a long period of time is going to be really, really important. And then once you're collecting all this data, figure out how you want to report and visualize this to the different members of your team. Here are some links that I've thrown out there. A couple that I didn't really talk about is there's, in the chain of data that's needed, one of the other things is the opportunity contact role, right? So this is more of a campaign influence thing than a UTM, so to speak. But I came across a really cool App Exchange app last month, which lets you automatically create those contact roles. It's a free app on the App Exchange. It is super powerful. It lets you define multiple different rules for different types of opportunities or different campaigns. It's really awesome. So definitely check that out. I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn if you have questions. I know it's been really quiet in the chat. I know Kate can sometimes be intimidating. I'm just kidding, Kate. Oh, there we go. Testing. Are you testing the chat, Nikki, or are you asking about testing with UTMs? Oh, there was an issue with the chat. Oh, okay. Well, if you posted a question and I didn't answer it, please, I don't know, put it in chat now. Otherwise, that's all I had planned for today. Again, I appreciate everyone coming out, spending some time with the group, and yeah, that's it, I guess.
Adam, I want to say thank you very much. That was terrific and very informative. I appreciate you sharing, taking the time to walk everyone through this. Kate, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, really enjoyed the presentation. Thanks, Adam.
Adam, is there one quick on the app that you created? Can you talk about like where that's available, or is there any cost associated to that? Or
I didn't want this presentation to be like a sales thing at all, because that's gross.
Yeah. No, I know.
If anyone is interested, the Siphuno Labs website has a product page for it.
Okay.
It is a paid app. It's $300 a month.
Okay.
So if anyone here wants to hit me up directly, I'm sure we can figure out something that's a little bit better and different. Yeah, and the campaign influence accelerators I mentioned earlier, it is a free unmanaged package, right? So it's a one-click install. You get the reports, you get the 3 dashboards. One of the dashboards is actually a campaign influence troubleshooting dashboard. So it's got a bunch of different metrics to help highlight where your data problems might be. That one was really fun to put together. Yeah.
Adam, can you just confirm? It looks like Brittany was just asking the name of the app that has the UTM sidebar on the lead and contact objects. That's the UTM capture and reporting app that you developed, correct?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I have links and stuff, but when I paste them into the chat, they lose the hyperlinking. So yeah, just hit me up directly on LinkedIn. I promise I won't spam you with stuff, because again, I think that's really gross. But yeah, any questions? That should be it.
I saw someone. There was a question around about the recording. Yes, we will figure out how we can make the recording from the platform available. I'm not sure if it happens automatically, but we will check in on that. And then I would say like people should check out the campaign influence accelerator. I think those are really cool, and I appreciate that they're kind of unmanaged, so you can edit them as well if you need to.
Yeah, unmanaged, ungated. I won't know if you go get them or not, but if you do and it's helpful, just let me know. If there's something that you wish was there, again, let me know and I'll build it in.
Yeah, and we'll definitely make a post in the Trailblazer community forum with all of the links to reach out to Adam or get the apps that he's talked about today.
Yep. Thank you again, Adam, for taking the time to present. Really do appreciate it. And then, as I mentioned early on, we'll have our next meeting at the end of April. So be on the lookout for more information about that as it comes up. Otherwise, I know Kate, Aaron, and myself would love to hear from everyone. If there are topics that you would like us to try and get speakers for, anything else that you want to discuss, feel free to reach out and we will do our best to accommodate. Otherwise, we can end a few minutes early and you can have some of your lunchtime back. And I just want to say thank you again to everyone participation.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.